Hey everybody, my name is SPAZ, and I'm a CD Junkie. On this episode of CD Junkie, I'm going to talk about a band that some have called garage rock. Some people call them psych rock. Some people even call them power pop. But I call them Translator. Translator is a quartet. Steve Barton on guitar and vocals, Robert Darlington on guitar and vocals, Larry Decker on bass, and Dave Sheff on drums. When they got together, they ended up in San Francisco, and they signed a deal with the San Francisco label, and eventually that led up to their debut album, which was called Heartbeats and Triggers, and that's where I discovered the band. Heartbeats and Triggers came out in 1982. This is probably the most familiar of the albums by Translator because it has their hit single, Everywhere That I'm Not. And that ends up still on 80s radio stations, and it's still just a fondly remembered song from 1982. 1982 just happens to be my one of my favorite years for music. But Heartbeats and Triggers, it really was a blend of styles. It was garage rock. It was psych rock. It was power pop. It was post-punk. It was punk. It was everything mixed together. They definitely were influenced by 60s music. And Steve Barton and Robert Darlington's vocal blend just really made the band sound unique. And it really accented the melodies. Now, Steve Barton's songs tended to get more airplay, which is kind of sad for Robert Darlington because he is every bit Steve Barton's equal. Both of them, on the same level, and, definitely a band to check out if you like the stuff that I've mentioned. This one here, it has bonus tracks. This came out on Wounded Bird. And this is definitely a fantastic album. By the way, this also has Sleeping Snakes and Everywhere, and it's just a stellar album. Really, Heartbeats and Triggers, 1982. That was followed the next year, in 1983, by No Time Like Now. Equally great album. Their sound really came together on this album, and this, of course, has bonus tracks. What I want to draw attention to on this album is there was a single called Breakdown Barriers, and it was released as a 12-inch extended, which is strange, but it is kind of post-punky, kind of edgy, angular type stuff, which made it perfect for dance music. But it's interesting because it had two bonus tracks on the 12-inch, one of which is Eraser, and the other one is, are you ready for it, Beatles fans? Cry for a Shadow. That's right, the instrumental that was written by George Harrison and Paul McCartney. That is a bonus track on the No Time Like Now. This is a 1983 album. Again, Barton and Darlington bring the songs to the table, and it's fantabulous. 1985 gave us the self-titled album. Probably my least favorite of the Translator covers. But yet another stellar collection of songs. Definitely worth checking out. Then in 1986, they put out Evening of the Harvest. Now, the thing about Translator is, although it was subtle, every album they seemed to be growing and maturing and trying new and different things, and while still maintaining that Translator sound. Now, this album here really showed them sort of stretching out, not in a commercial way, but bringing more influences into their sound. And this was a fantastic album. I thought, this definitely bodes well for the future. I can't wait to see what they do next. And usually, I should stop thinking that, because usually when I think that, I can't wait to see what they do next, they break up. And that's what Translator did. Now, the thing about Translator, it's a little bit dark. It's not this happy-go-lucky jazz hands type music. It's multi-dimensional. There's a lot of things going on, and as I said, with the two singer-songwriters, that really made them a special band. Of course, they broke up after Evening of the Harvest, but the band members remained friendly, and they would work on other projects and occasionally reunite. But it was 2012 that there was a digital-only album called Big Green Lawn that came out, and it was all four original members, and they'd gotten back together, and it was a brand new Translator, but oh my gosh, it was digital. That did my head in. You know, I'm a fan of physical products, CDs. So I was a little disappointed, but I was able to listen to it, and I thought it was a great collection of songs. Well, 5 years later, out comes Carriage of Days. This was 2017. And not only did it feature the Big Green Lawn EP, which is the second half of this collection, it also featured a handful of new tracks. So if you bought Big Green Lawn digital only and you wanted to get it on CD, you'll get that and more on Carriage of Days. And this is a 2017. Yes, this has Steve Barton, Robert Darlington, Dave Sheff, and Larry Decker, all four original members. Still playing, and they still do occasional shows. They still play together, so it's really nice. But there's been many collections along the way. Translations, I think, was a name of one of the compilations. You know, the best of the four albums. There was also Everywhere That We Were, a retrospective, and a couple compilations along the way that basically compiled stuff off of the four albums that they had put out. Well, in 2015, Sometimes People Forget came out on Omnivore Records, and what this does is it combines a bunch of early demos, unreleased recordings. Some of these tracks ended up in finished form on their albums, while others are only on this collection. First couple tracks are recorded when they were a trio before Robert Darlington joined, so that's really interesting. But Translator, Sometimes People Forget. Another compilation that I just happen to have in my collection this came out on Al McCantar Records. It's called Different Time, and it was a collection of live recordings. And it was a 2 CD set, and somehow, somewhere along the way, somebody switched CDs in my collection because for some reason, mine's a single disc CDR. Can you believe that? Single disc CDR. I don't know how this ended up in my collection, because I used to have the 2 CD version on Al McCantar Records. This is long out of print. But if you like live recordings, definitely check that out. Now, the band members, in between their first four albums and like Carriage of Days, they all went their separate ways and would occasionally work together, whatever. But Dave Sheff went off and he played with a band called Winter Hours and some other bands. Larry Decker played with a bunch of bands. Robert Darlington, who's a published author, he actually put out a solo album that I've never been able to find. And of course, if it's digital only, I guess I'm going to have to get into that. But CDs, you know, they don't call this Digital Junkie. This is CD Junkie. So anyway, I'm going to have to track down that Robert Darlington if it is on CD. If anybody knows, let me know. Anyway, but Steve Barton, he hasn't been that prolific, but he has put out some very, very fine albums. And I'm going to show those to you right now. Any Translator fans should definitely check these out. They're probably, you know, thing about Translator is all four members. The chemistry was fantastic between the four members. It wouldn't work the same way with 2 or 3 of them. It has to be all 4 of them for it to really sound like Translator. But the Steve Barton albums are fantastic, and you know, he rarely works with the Translator guys on them. But if you like Steve Barton songs on the Translator albums, then you should definitely check out his solo career. Started in 1999 with The Boy Who Rode His Bike Around the World. There's that. Next up was Charm Offensive. They came out in 2004. Then he started working with a backing band that he called the Oblivion Clique. So Steve Barton and the Oblivion Clique. Flicker of Time came out in 2007. Gallery, another album with the Oblivion Clique, came out in 2008. And then he was back on his own with 2012's Projector. In 2017, he put out an album with Translator drummer Dave Sheff, and that's called New Blue World. Now, Steve Barton is traveling his own musical path. The later albums tend to sound less like Translator, but they're definitely Steve Barton coming into his own. He's still exploring music, still doing different things. And the proof of that is his 2018 album, which is his latest. This is a fine album indeed. But what makes it fine, apart from the fact that it's got a lot of great songs on it, is it's a triple album. 3 CDs. I mean, how many artists do you know? I mean, nobody even does double albums anymore. In fact, when you see vinyl nowadays, and it's like a 2-record album, they put like 2 or 3 songs aside just because they want to say that they have a double album. But no, this is, I mean, this would probably have to be a 4 or 5 LP release if they put it out on vinyl. But this is, it's got some band recordings that features, I think Pete Thomas from The Attractions is on a couple tracks. And it's got an album of like just solo home recordings, and it's just fantastic. None of these songs are like re-recordings of anything. It's a whole new batch of songs. It's not pristine, clean production. It's raw. It's rough. It's edgy. It's mellow. It's sad. It's emotional. But it's a really, really, really neat listen. It's probably the least Translator sounding of his albums, but at the same time, that's fine because it's a Steve Barton album. Well, that's it for this Translator video. I hope that you check out Translator. I mean, Heartbeats and Triggers is just one of those albums that's still spellbinding to me all these years later. And, you know, I can't say enough good things about this band. I just want you to check them out. Maybe go on YouTube and, you know, listen to a couple songs. Everywhere That I'm Not, Sleeping Snakes, Everywhere, Unalone, A Cry for a Shadow, and definitely check out Steve Barton. And if anybody can help me track down that Robert Darlington solo album on CD, I really appreciate it. Speaking of which, my name is SPAZ, and I'm a CD junkie.